Welcome everyone to the Disability Voices United webinar on employment and the coronavirus. We're just going to gather people right now and let our attendees join in. We want to let everybody know that we're going to be broadcasting live on Facebook. So as we are assembling, our program assistant Ed is going to be putting us live on Facebook, and we will start after that happens. So thank you all for joining us. As people join in, I want to welcome you to our webinar. We really are happy that you are here, and we are just gathering everyone right now. Okay, great. So we're now streaming live on Facebook. Welcome everybody to the Disability Voices United webinar on going back to work during a time of coronavirus. My name is Judy Mark. I am the president of Disability Voices United, and I'm a parent of a 23-year-old son who is served by a regional center. And we are really, really happy to have you here. We have some amazing speakers ahead. I'm really excited because I'm not actually hosting this webinar. I am not the MC. This makes me so happy that that stress is off my back for this time. Although you will hear me chiming in at times with some questions for our panelists. But before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know who requires Spanish interpretation, that is available. And right now I would like to ask Lorna Silva, our Spanish interpreter, to tell you how you can access the Spanish interpretation.
Para todas las personas que hablan español y necesitan interpretación simultánea, pueden llamar al 551-241-6310. De nuevo, 551-241-6310 para escuchar la interpretación simultánea al español. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorna. So now I would like to also mention that this webinar is being recorded. We get that question at the beginning every week. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be put up hopefully by tomorrow or the next day on our coronavirus resources website. Our website is, in case you are interested in looking at it while we're talking, it's disabilityvoicesunited.org/CV, like coronavirus CV. And you can also find this information in the chat. You can also see all of the webinars. This is, I believe, is our 16th webinar. We've been running these webinars since mid-March, and we have incredible resources on our website about everything related to healthcare, to education, to resources for families on what to do if you believe somebody in your household has coronavirus. We have great toolkits for you on mental health. We have toolkits for you on creating a health passport. So if you are requiring to go to the emergency room or a hospital setting, you can bring this health passport with you. So I encourage you to explore our coronavirus website. It's got lots of great materials on it, some of which are original that we have written at Disability Voices United, some of which are partners, such as Clarissa Kripke at the University of California at San Francisco has written, and some of which are national resources. Today we are talking about employment, but before we get started, what I wanted to do was to explain to everybody how you can ask questions. Because this is a webinar, which is different than a meeting, the only people who are able to speak are those individuals who you are seeing on your screen right now, people who are presenters on this webinar. But there are a couple of different ways that you could ask questions. The best way, the very, very best way, is to go down to the bottom of your screen and to click on Q&A, standing for question and answer. If you click on Q&A, you can ask a question related to any of the topics that we're talking about or targeted to any of our speakers. If you have more of a question or want to share information about any other resources or have a question about some of the technology that we're using on Zoom, please put that in the chat, and Ed Herzl, our program assistant, will be monitoring the chat, and she'll be able to answer it in real time. But if you have actually a specific question for our presenters, please put it in the Q&A, because it's the easiest way for me to get your question answered. All right, so seeing nothing else that I need to tell you about, I want to, oh, actually, no, I do have one more thing. Sorry about that. I wanted to promote a DVU thing. So Disability Voices United is recruiting parents for a focus group in 2 days on Saturday on supported decision making. So we are looking for parents of children who are teenagers or young adults who have not been conserved, who are not conserved, to participate in a focus group that we are having, and you will be paid with a $25 Target gift card for your participation. We will have information on how to register for that focus group in the chat that Ed, I can see, is putting in there right now. So we really urge parents who might have an interest in participating. It's this Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. And we hope that that's July 25th, we hope that you'll be interested in joining us. So without further ado, I want to introduce the Emcee for this particular panel, who is way more of an expert on employment than I am. It's one of DVU's fabulous board members with me, Vivian Hahn, who is also an incredible sister to a man who is in the self-determination program. And so thank you, Vivian, for getting this whole event together and for hosting today. So go ahead and take it away, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Judy. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Vivian. And in addition to serving on the board of Disability Voices United, I am a special education attorney and policy analyst. I've worked with school districts, SELPAs, and charter schools across the state. And one of the things that I focused on is transition for students with disabilities, with a focus on getting them pointed to opportunities for employment and higher education beyond the K through 12 system. And as Judy mentioned, I'm also a sibling. My brother Brian is someone who has gone through a couple of volunteer positions and one paid job. So we have been through that system, and I've had that experience supporting him and cheering him on as a sister. So welcome, everyone. We're really pleased to have you with us today. I'd like to start with our first panelist. Peter, are you available?
Yes. It's good to be with all of you.
Wonderful. So thank you for being here today, Peter. Everyone, this is Peter Mendoza. He is a self-advocate, and also he is the Director of Advocacy and Special Projects at the Marin Center for Independent Living. Thank you, Peter.
It's good to be here with you all.
Wonderful. Oh, please go ahead.
I just wanted to tell everyone a little bit about myself.
Yes, please.
As Vivian mentioned, I'm the Director of Advocacy at the Marin Center for Independent Living. For those of you who may not know what independent living centers are, we support people with disabilities of all ages. And our main goal is to make sure that people with disabilities get to do whatever they want. Independent living centers were started as part of the independent living movement. The first independent living center was in 1972 through the work of Ed Roberts and the Rolling Quads. And basically they worked first to promote wheelchair access and programmatic access for people with disabilities in Berkeley, and it moved on to a worldwide movement. So some of the services we provide, we're able to help folks with disabilities wherever they are. We provide self-advocacy training, advocacy skills building. We also support folks who need assistance with advocacy or getting access to programs. We provide assistance with housing benefits, housing and benefits counseling, just an array of services, including assistive technology, all aspects to help somebody build their journey towards independence. And I've also served on I was the chair of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, and have been very active in sort of what we call both sides of the pond, the Independent Living Center side and the other side of the pond, working a lot with regional center service advocacy and various DDS services and programs. So it's an honor to be here with you all today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. So for our time together, I have 3 questions for you. Let's start with the first one. Could you speak to us about some of the concerns you may have about people with disabilities being left behind in employment because they may be more susceptible to COVID-19?
I do have some concerns, and these are partially because of COVID-19, but also people with disabilities. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're only employed, 19% of us are employed as of 2019 compared to 66% of the general public without disabilities. So we experience barriers in employment even before COVID-19. So whenever there's an economic downturn, people with disabilities are adversely affected. One of the concerns that I have with COVID-19 for all of us, I'm lucky. In a way, I have privilege. I am still able to work. Marin Center for Independent Living worked with all of us. We went to a remote status because of COVID-19, because one thing that's important to know about independent living centers is that the majority of the employees and board are people with disabilities. So we're uniquely impacted by COVID-19, but also so are the clients we serve. So we're still providing services to people with disabilities, but we're doing it remotely. So I think some of the issues that you have to think about when you go back to work, for example, in our discussions with our office and our reopening plan, it's sort of moving slowly. One, because the pandemic is still very much a part of life right now, but we have things we have to consider as people with disabilities. For example, for me, I have home health people, personal care assistants, who assist me at work with activities of daily living. And one thing that happened with COVID-19 in my own life here at home is that, I had to really talk to my care team about how I could support them and being able to work, and were they able to work. Plus, for me, I have another concern. I have family members here who are also very susceptible to COVID-19 because of their own health conditions. So I think one of the things we have to do, and particularly if you're supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's sort of a team approach with the person who is, the person with a disability being in the lead with the discussion. Because you have to look at access to public transportation. Are there buses? So if the person has to take public transit, and the majority of folks with disabilities are very transit dependent. So in Marin County, for example, buses are running, but they're running at different schedules and not as many buses. A train system called SMART is, reduce some of their routes. So you have to build a support team. It really has to be a collaborative process with the person with a disability leading and providing as much support as they need to help them, return to work and discuss what they need, because there's a lot of anxiety around COVID-19 as well.
Absolutely. And Peter, you started to touch on this earlier. Could you talk to us a little bit more about concerns related to transportation, access, and other modes of transit?
Well, again, some of the existing supports that people with disabilities rely on may not be available or may not be available as much. For example, not only are transit districts adjusting schedules, but many are adopting social distancing. In Marin, their buses roughly accommodate, I think, between 48 and 60 people, depending on the bus. And now my understanding is that they're only accommodating 10. So you may have a social distancing requirement. The bus may come, but if it's at capacity because of COVID. That's an issue. So I would recommend for people with disabilities to really reach out to the transit district and have a discussion, find out how often the buses are going to be running and what's required. A lot of transit districts are requiring masks, so that's something you have to talk about with the person with a disability too, because some folks in our community can't wear masks because of health conditions or other issues. You know, I should mention too that my brother Michael, we're both regional center consumers, and he lives in Santa Fe in one of the pathway homes, and he doesn't really do well with a mask, so it causes him to, he doesn't like them and he'll take it off right away. So you have to look at issues like that too, so that the person with a disability, just like a person without disability, can be as comfortable as possible.
Definitely. Thank you, Peter. I wanted to ask you too about thinking about going back to work or being rehired after COVID, which we hope will come someday. But what concerns do you have about people with disabilities being rehired and going back to work once we've moved past the current COVID crisis?
Well, I think what you have to think about in going back to work, people, there may need to be accommodations made, or there may be new policies that folks may not be familiar with. Like, for example, when we have our reopening, not all of us are going back to work at the same time. We're going to work different days, sort of staggered, so that we can maintain social distancing requirements. And for folks with disabilities who are already dealing with isolation and other issues because of COVID-19, having their routines interrupted, there may be some insecurity. They may not see the same people they see. They may not, some of my accommodations, while I have personal assistance services at work, I have a really great team who can help me do things that I'm not able to do that are work related, like make copies. Okay, I'm sort of the policy guy, but dexterity isn't my forte. But my team's really good. If I need something, we all help each other out. So there may be some supports that may not be there, or life is going to look different. And I think it's important too, and this makes everyone, well, I'll speak for myself. I've been had a disability all my life, and I'm a pretty strong advocate. But even when I have to go in and talk to an employer about reasonable accommodation, is everyone familiar with the term reasonable accommodation? Okay. Well, I should say for those who are not, a reasonable accommodation is a modification or alteration to a job so that you're able to do it. You can discuss, for example, I'm not able to do copies. So I talk to my employer and we work out a way that I can do copies or other tasks. I have a hard time. I use voice activated software to do my correspondence. Well, my office is too noisy. So even before COVID, I would work 1 or 2 days a week at home so I could do all my correspondence. That way I could have a quiet work environment. I need to take an extra break periodically because I have to take a comfort break. And so and a reasonable accommodation is both, that's in California law and also Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it basically it starts an interactive process between you and a person with a disability to discuss job modifications or accommodations so a person with disability is able to do their job. And employers are really supposed to participate in this interactive process. And they, for the most part, have to grant the accommodation unless it's financially in case it's financially really expensive or modifies, substantially modifies their program. In other words, if they have to do something that they wouldn't normally have to do, that alters their program. And there's a standard, so it has to be a discussion.
Thank you, Peter. There's just so much here that we could get into. Judy, I know you've been keeping an eye on the questions. Are there questions that have come in for Peter, or questions that anyone else may have for him?
Not yet. There's a few unrelated questions, so I think we can keep going, and then I'm sure there will be a bunch of questions Peter can answer.
Okay, great. Do any of our panelists, I've seen some of you nodding your heads as Peter has been speaking, do any of you have any questions or any questions for Peter, or things you might like to add? No? Okay. Peter, I will, go ahead.
I would like to mention that there's time. This is where, you know, for folks that are, you know, our community that are involved with the regional center or Department of Rehabilitation. Department of Rehabilitation is a state agency that supports people with disabilities in either get services and supports to be able to go to work, or to return to employment after they've experienced a disability. And there's State Department of Rehab offices that are throughout the state. They're a terrific resource. Also, the regional center system, as we know, is supporting people with disabilities and employment under the Workforce Opportunity Act, WIOA. So it's really important that regional centers have, and the Department of Rehabilitation, and when there's an issue, they can help provide technical assistance. Also, the EEOC published back in March guidance and interpretation for COVID-19 as it relates to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and they have a list of questions and answers. It's a terrific guide. And you can also get more information if you go to the Job Accommodation Network and click on COVID-19. There's many resources out there.
Yes, I see that Deborah has a question.
I do have a question for Peter. What was your first job, and how did you get your current job?
Well, let's see. My first job was when I was like 16. I was in the CEDA program at that time, and I should say I'm 54, so life was a lot different back then. CEDA was a program to support people with disabilities and folks from other marginalized communities in getting work experience. So my first job was working at a daycare center with kids. I loved it, and it was for the summer. My first job after that, I began working for a veterans agency. And then how I got my current job, well, I worked at Marin Center for Independent Living many years ago, and had always been involved in disability rights and independent living. And so I moved on from Marin Center for Independent Living after a few years, back in the late 80s, early 90s, went to work in public safety and served on boards and was still advocating people with disabilities. And then around 2010, I took a job as a client rights advocate for folks that are having disputes with the State Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. Then I was a program manager. Then I went to another ILC, and when my wife and I, after we've been married a few years, we decided to move back to Marin, and there was an opening at Marin Center for Independent Living, working with folks that I've been talking to for the last 20 years, so I got hired back. So I've been back for about 6 years now.
Thanks.
It's quite a path you've taken.
Thanks, Peter. And I meant to say this at the beginning, is that this week is the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Happy anniversary, everybody. It is so wonderful to be doing this topic this week, since the ADA really was so much about employment when it was first conceived, and so, and discrimination in employment and accommodations in employment. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Peter. That was a really critical piece.
Thank you. And it's really been an honor to be here.
Thank you, Peter. You've been such a good friend to all of us. Can I take Kevin as the next speaker, Vivian?
Absolutely.
All right, because Kevin's my buddy. Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Hi. So Kevin, I see you have a very cool background
Thanks.
that I want you to talk about. But Kevin is a self-advocate in San Diego. And I was wondering if you could talk about I'm not going to give away where you work because you'll tell everybody based on your background. But
Yeah.
could you talk about the job that you had before the coronavirus hit and what you miss about working? Have you heard from them? Are you going to get your job back? Are you concerned about that? That kind of stuff. So go ahead, Kevin. We're so happy
All
to
right.
have you.
So I work at the Casa Hotel, which is the restaurant behind me. And it's called Dragon's Den, and I do bussing tables. I get to help any like spills if they need cleaning everything up the floor, and dust panning, and sometimes during dinner, since I don't work dinner shifts anymore, I used to serve drinks to the tables at one point.
And we should clarify that this hotel is associated with which amusement park?
LEGOLAND.
LEGOLAND, right. So what was it about this job that you were excited about when you got it?
Seeing everybody's faces again, who I used to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. So and do you love LEGOLAND? Like,
Oh, yes.
You were a kid. Did you grow up going there?
I went in 2000 when it actually first opened, well, 1999, the year after that, after the year was open.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So you have this great job. And when did you stop? When did your job stop because of the coronavirus?
It stopped on the day after St. Patrick's Day.
So that's a bummer. And have you heard from them since? Have you had any? I know that they haven't been able to reopen yet, but have you heard from them about anything?
Charlene, one of my managers, was really helpful. She said the hotel is reopening, but they can't have any bussers going yet.
Okay. Are you worried about not getting your job back?
As far I know, they've been opening little by different stages. So I've been going there. I bought Lego sets not that long ago during this week. And then I went to Sea Life Aquarium with two friends of mine. One works there, one does not. So I invited them to go to Sea Life Aquarium. So Sea Life Aquarium reclosed again. And so it was like a cool learning experience to see what they're doing. And they have like 5 feet apart from each other, like on the ground when you first walk into the park, which is nice to have.
So have you thought about what you might do if it takes a really long time to reopen amusement parks? I mean, from what I understand, amusement parks are going to be about the last thing that get reopened.
Oh, yeah.
And so have you thought, like, are you interested in any other kinds of jobs in the meantime, but until LEGOLAND reopens?
I was thinking of applying for Krispy Kreme donuts, but I just kind of like, I didn't like the shift that much, and like, because they were going to put me like from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift. And then I was like, nah, it's not work for me. So.
Yeah. So, but maybe we can think, we have lots of experts on this webinar who may have some really cool ideas for you to think about unique ways for you to stay working and to make some money while we're waiting for things to reopen.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's keep that. So, go ahead. I'm going to hand it back to Vivian so we can get started, and then we can maybe keep talking to Kevin and have Peter weigh in as well about where we're moving forward and some advice for the community out there.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you so much, Kevin, for being with us. I think some of our upcoming panelists may have some ideas, like Judy said, so we will definitely get back to you, I think, later in this presentation, hopefully with some suggestions for you. Thank you for joining us. So without further ado, I'm really just thrilled to introduce some of my colleagues. In addition to being a member of the board at DVU, I'm also fortunate enough to be on the board of this next organization that I'm introducing, which is California Emcee. And we will talk a little bit more about that organization and what it does. But first, I would like to introduce some of our speakers today. I think the easiest thing to do might be for me to call on each of you. And if each of you could go around and just do a very quick introduction of who you are. And then we will go ahead and get started on the slides after that. So Deborah, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Debra Jorgensen. I'm an attorney and a consultant. I'm a former attorney at Disability Rights California. I've worked on employment issues for the last 10 to 15 years, and you know, served clients and just continue to be really passionate about our march forward with employment first in the state of California. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Deborah. Next, can we go to Rebecca?
Sure, I'm Rebecca LaBoriel. Gosh, I've been in the field for over 25 years in all various aspects of the service industry. Just love employment, being able to advocate for folks, and just happy to be amongst everyone here.
Excellent, thank you, Rebecca. How about Brittany? Brittany, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry, there we go. Hi, I'm Brittany Robinson. I've been in the field for about a decade, and I am currently a client coach and independent facilitator at Guidelight Group. At Guidelight Group, we serve California teens and adults with developmental disabilities, and we specialize in person-centered planning, life coaching, and transition planning, and of course, employment services. So that's what I'm currently doing, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. And last, but certainly not least, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Sanders. I'm the employment specialist for San Andreas Regional Center. I'm also California Emcee's board president, and we are so excited to be here today to share with you a little bit more about employment and really what that looks like during COVID, and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and let the rest of our board of directors take over.
Thank you, Catherine. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. We have some slides for you today. And in case any of you are wondering, we will make these slides available to everyone later. We will give these over to Judy and Ed, and they can help us get that up on the DVU website. Ed, I am trying to share my screen, but it looks like you might need to enable that for me.
1 second, there you go. You should be able to do it now. Sorry about that, Vivian.
I'm gonna try, no problem. Okay. Wait, that is not what I want.
And Vivian, while you're getting that set up, I just wanted to jump in and say a huge thank you to all of our speakers today, both Kevin and Peter, and talking about the importance of discussion. I think that's such an important part of when we talk about employment first and person-centered planning. It really comes back to the discussion of employment and what people want and their goals, and making sure that the individual we're talking about really is at the center of that discussion and part of the discussion. So we're really excited to bring in that idea and tying in what you both have talked about into what we're going to share a little bit more, and maybe some ways of how to do that today. So we did our introductions of our team. Again, we're so excited. we're going to have some of our,
Can you just explain what Advocacy is and what it stands for? Because most people have never heard of it, I'm sure.
Yes, I'll finish the agenda, and we have a couple of slides that we'll go over really who Advocacy is, because that's a good question.
I don't even know what it stands for. So the acronym would be helpful too.
Of course, of course. So I'll finish the agenda. So we're going to talk about what Employment First is. Then we're going to go into the best practices for customized employment, what individualized employment is and why it's important. And then we're going to jump into how to approach employment during COVID. I think something that everybody's really excited to hear about because things have changed so vastly. And then we're going to share some different resources and tips that you guys can really walk away from this presentation with.
Okay, hi. I'm going to start to talk, kind of give the lay of the land, define a few things, talk about who we are. So what is Employment First? So it's a movement to deliver meaningful employment, fair wages, and career advancement for people with disabilities. It's really a grassroots movement. And the point of Employment First is that employment should happen, you know, in the general workforce being the first and preferred outcome for all working age people with disabilities, regardless of the severity of the disability. What we're really talking about when we say employment first or competitive integrated employment is real jobs with real wages in the real world. It's the jobs that Peter and Kevin have. And we are working hard, and the Employment First movement is working hard to make that available for everyone, everyone with disabilities, and particularly people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So let's go to the next slide. So APSE is the Association for People Supporting Employment First. There's a national APSE organization that was created 30 years ago, right about the time that the ADA came into law. And so people is a very general term because it includes like a huge cross-section of professionals, of individuals with disabilities, families. It could be service providers, it's regional center staff, Department of Rehab staff, state council. I mean, there's just a huge variety of people who are part of this movement and share this ideal about employment first being important and being the thing that we want to encourage in the DD system. So California APSE, we're one of 40 state chapters, and we're really a community network. We collaborate, we try to find ways to impact policy and you know, how systems work, how funding works. We're focused on advocacy and education. So we will weigh in on things that have to do with employment, where we really want to see the system change. And for education, you know, over the years, we've done in-person conferences, and those are always really successful, wonderful opportunities to meet people face to face. But in this new era, you know, I think before COVID really hit, we decided to do kind of a quarterly learning opportunity. We call it a lunch and learn. So we've already done 2 of them this year, and we're planning our 3rd one for next in August. So we'll talk about that at the end. But education is a huge piece of this, and that's why we're so thankful that we're on to the DBU audience and that we're live on Facebook and all of that, because we really just have to get the word out that employment first is so important. We are an employment first state. In 2013, we passed a law that says it's the policy of the state that opportunities for competitive integrated employment should be given the highest priority for working age individuals with developmental disabilities, regardless of the severity of their disability. So that's been on the books for 6 or 7 years now. What this really means, and the way I advocate for it, if a person is 16 years of age or older with an intellectual or developmental disability and they ask for CIE, they should not be told no. We are an employment first state. Okay, next page. So that's the employment first policy and law is on the state level. So going up to the federal level, we have this really important home and community-based services waiver that's issued through the Medicaid system. And there were final rules put in place many years ago that are really pushing the bill on individualized support. So this HCBS rule applies to both residential and day program and employment settings. The rule really dictates, it tells the states what they can do with the federal money that they get. So the law, when the rule initially came out, it was supposed to be fully implemented by 2019. In the last few years, that has been pushed back now twice. So by 2023, states cannot use this money to pay for any kind of segregated site or service. So when this all finally happens in 2023, providers and states will have had close to a decade to make these changes. And I just want to underscore that because this didn't happen yesterday. The HCBS rule requires that states offer individuals a choice of a non-disability specific setting. What that means is a job at LEGOLAND. What that means is, opportunities to work in competitive integrated employment. And those are all based on person-centered, person-driven principles. This rule is really a game changer for increasing opportunities for employment. And I ask for it and demand it because sometimes people say, nobody tells us they want to work. You got to make your voice heard. We know that these services and it's not available everywhere in the state. But to this last point, all states must assess their current capacity of non-disability specific settings and develop a plan to increase capacity so that all individuals have a real and meaningful choice for CIE. So the rule is very clear in terms of what the state needs to do in that respect. Okay, individualized employment supports. So traditionally employment supports have been provided through programs that are at segregated settings. And I'm talking about things like workshops, work activity programs, sheltered workshops, sometimes they're called, or even like work crews or groups that go around to different settings, but they may not be integrated and they're not necessarily employed by the business. So progressive employment providers utilize a very person-centered and person-driven model that's tailored to really, look at the person's wants and needs and, how they want to live their life. And so much of that involves choice, which is a really important concept. So the need to transform. So what's happening at this point is, providers that have done kind of the typical like segregated sites, they either need to transform or they're not going to have funding come 2023. And I would argue my lawyer self that, the ADA has been around for 30 years and the Olmstead decision has been around for, 20 some years. And there is already an need for all providers to be providing these types of services. So don't wait for 2022 to start this process. It's hard work, and we'll hear from some of the providers who are doing this work on our board in just a minute. So anyway, these individualized employment supports are they're driven by best practices. There's evidence of better outcomes with these types of supports. And I also want to just point out in the slide, there's a really great publication that talks about what choice is and what informed choice is and kind of walks through. It's not just saying to somebody who's worked in one setting for 20 years, do you want to go work somewhere else? Because they may not even understand what something else even means. So, there's the Institute for Community Inclusion put out this really nice 5 steps you need to go through to really call it informed choice. So I'm going to hand it off now to talk about what best practice employment supports look like. And Brittany, take it away.
Cool. So the process that we use in modern employment services is called customized employment. Customized employment allows us to recognize a few things. And it allows us to recognize that everyone has something valuable to offer. Different types of workplaces are best for different types of people. And your job should match your personality and how you like to live your life. So here's how it works. There are 3 steps, and I'm going to explain each step in more detail in a minute, but I'd first like to look at this flowchart just so you can see overall what it looks like. The process starts with discovery. Okay, so the first step is called discovery. It's all about you. So this is getting to know your strengths, interests, talents, preferences, skills, values, personality traits, goals, and more. Also in this phase, you will identify your ideal conditions of employment. So of course that is your job developer or your provider helping you do that, to discover all of those things about you, the job seeker, and really figure out what your ideal condition of employment is. Second is field research and informational interviews. So this means learning about possible businesses in your community, local businesses, where your ideal conditions of employment might exist, and understanding the needs of these businesses and how you as a job seeker might be able to add value. So lastly, once you gather all of that information about yourself as a job seeker and the different businesses in your community, how you can add value, that's when we can finally make a match. And what that looks like is actually proposing or creating a customized job that fits your strengths, interests, talents, preferences, etc., and fills a need for the business. Okay, so it has to make business sense, which means it's truly a win-win. So it's a win, of course, for the job seeker and the business itself. So it's a real relationship. It's not a job that existed before, and it's not a response to a job posting. It's a truly individualized process that leads to a customized job. So that's an overview. And now let's get into a little bit more detail. So step 1, as I mentioned before, is called discovery. The goal of discovery is to identify your ideal conditions of employment, like mentioned before. So your provider will gather a lot of very important information about you. Just some of those things will include your dreams and goals, talents, skills, interests, what are your values, personality traits, and environmental preferences? What are your dislikes and possible challenges? What solutions or accommodations work for you, right? And in which ways are you best supported in the community, in the workplace? So in order to gather this information, the employment specialist will spend time with you in different settings and situations, interviews and conversations with family, friends, and other people who know you really, really well and like you. And also observations of you at home, school, work, day program, community, right? Seeing things that you enjoy and things that you might want to do for work. This, during COVID, this may look different, but, you can conduct virtual activities around the home using Zoom or something similar. This might look like giving a tour of your house and your favorite rooms in the house and your favorite belongings in those rooms. And that can easily be done via Zoom or Skype or whatever you're familiar with. And also career assessments. That includes formal, informal, and situational. Experiences including job shadowing, volunteering, again, informational interviews, and visiting real work settings. And then after gathering all of that information, about you as a job seeker that's compiled into what's called a vocational profile. And once your job developer or employment specialist has compiled all of that information and it's in one beautiful, sometimes even a one-page personal profile, then it's time to really start brainstorming some different possibilities and ideas. And that leads us to step 2, which is called field research and informational interviews. So the goal of this step is to identify businesses in your community that match your ideal conditions and understand how your skills might add value to them. So your job developer or employment specialist will research new industries based on your interests and goals, also research specific businesses in your area, network to get connected to people who can help us learn more about those businesses and potential jobs, conduct informational interviews with employers to learn even more. And I do want to highlight that we are not expecting a job to come from these informational interviews. It's purely just for us to learn more. And also, you know, during COVID, right, this may look like you can have an informational interview, you know, can be done over the phone with someone in a field or job that you might want to explore. It could be a virtual coffee break with interviewees via FaceTime, Skype, or Zoom. So there are definitely virtual options here. And also spending time at the business to truly understand what happens there, how they operate, and to look for opportunities where the job seeker can add value. There are lots of places to look for opportunities to add value, some of which are, if there are customer or employee complaints, room for improvement there, backlogs, long wait times, unassigned but critical tasks. Oftentimes in many businesses, there are things that need to get done, but they are not assigned to any one person in particular, and they tend to get kind of put on the back burner. And that's a really great place to potentially add value. Wasted resources or personnel, high turnover, and workload fluctuations. So also in most businesses, there are busier times of the day and slower times of the day. So, you know, there's always opportunity to add value during those busier times to kind of help, you know, manage that workflow. And finally, the third and last step to customize employment is making that match. So the goal here is to propose and negotiate a customized job. So what this looks like is exactly this Venn diagram. It's when your skills, talents, personality, interests, and ideal conditions of employment, so all of that wonderful, juicy information that we got from the discovery process, overlaps or matches up with the employer's values, interests, and business needs. And once that match is found, then that is when we can go ahead and propose that customized job.
Great, thank you so much, Brittany. Rebecca?
Yes, I just want to say I'm really excited that these slides are going to be offered. We've got probably a good 20 resources embedded into the slides. So it's a good way to also be able to go back and use this as a resource guide, you know, as questions come up. So all great information, and this, now we're switching to employment during COVID. How can we do it? How do we continue? How do you continue in your job? You know, how do we look virtually online, prep for employment? For those that want to continue, I've got a number of folks that are essential workers that are continuing to work in the community, that are needed in the community. How do you work with the necessary precautions that all of us must have to take? And then a lot of folks are turning to self-employment, so we'll kind of explore some of those opportunities. Next slide. So employment during COVID, and I think it was brought up before about making sure that you've really got informed choice, and making sure that you may want to work, but, you know, as Peter, I think, stated that, you know, if you've got other underlying health issues, that it may just not be safe for you to work out in the community right now. I mean, all of us have to take a look at that within our own lives and with, you know, who we're at home with, as potential. Also, we talked about approaching employment and consulting your circle. And when we talk about circle, that simply is your circle of support. So I think, as Brittany mentioned, it's all about, you know, folks that are in your corner, that are your team, that want to, you know, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah. Uh-oh. That are
Sorry about that.
That's it. I can go. I've got notes here.
There we go.
That and that too, that could happen too. You know, they're all in your corner to want the best for you, and that are going to you know, just really contribute to what are the possibilities, right, that you could explore. Next slide. Using teamwork to identify the possibilities, right? So this is the fun stuff. This is where you can get really creative, hold virtual brainstorming meetings with your family. I think, like Brittany mentioned, I know that I've had a lot of folks that jump on Zoom, that are having kind of like parties to kind of figure out what really works for them. They kind of make a list of things that they're interested in, and then their circle of support, of course, those that they've invited to participate, will weigh in and say, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? I know that I've always kind of have this saying is like, you don't know until you really know. And so I think making sure that the folks that you have in the room, they have, you know, if you have an idea, they may too then know somebody. And it's like that piece of what Brittany was saying about making sure that you've got that networking piece, because you just don't know who you're connected to, right? Or who your family member or friends are connected to. Next slide. Let's see. So the vocational profile Brittany mentioned as well. I put in there this resource, a visual resume, which is great. That link is actually Elon Musk from Tesla had his visual resume out there. And what I've noticed is that I just saw, I think on NBC this morning, where you've got folks, I think it's in Southern California, that are having out of work photographers that are doing kind of like headshots for folks that are putting them into their resumes. So that's pretty cool as an idea. Also, what we've done as well is that we've just simply taken like an iPad, and the job coach or somebody in their support circle can go and kind of go with you and take video of what you're doing and the jobs that you've done before, so that you can go into the interview or show through Zoom what your skills are. Who doesn't get nervous during an interview or presentation for that matter? So, you know, it's always good for the other person then to be able to see what you can do. And which is, it's always been welcome in my experience with open arms. People, interviewers have always been really taken aback. They've been really excited about the fact that they've been able to actually see that happen. So financial needs, that's always something, right, to remember and to make sure that you take into consideration. We've embedded several links there. You could run a BPQY, that's just your benefits, benefits inquiry, to see what kinds of benefits that you're getting, how will they be impacted, if they will be impacted, DB 101 is great. It's very interactive, the website, and you can go in and just plug your numbers into the website, and it'll kind of spit out this plan for you to say, if you work and you earn this much money, this is how much money you'll still get. And it also talks about things to consider. If you're one of those folks that have to have or keep your money around that $2,000 mark, CalAble is a great way to take and use that as an account, as a savings account. And as you can see there, you can contribute up to $15,000 per year. And there's also investment opportunities as well within CalAble. IRWIs, which are impairment related work expenses. Once you are working, that benefit right there will help you kind of take a look at what are the things that you need to use or purchase in order to make sure that you continue working successfully, and you can go ahead and deduct those expenses, which will then take down how much money then you're going to have to, how much money like Social Security will, take from you. So next slide. I think, Peter, you mentioned Jan, and Jan is the Job Accommodation Network. It's great. It's a wealth of knowledge. You can go in there into their search bar, and any question you have on any disability or any question related to work accommodations, they'll answer. It's great. So that's a good resource. Legal Aid at Work is mentioned by Debra, and that is if you're at work and you do have concerns regarding, say, policies or other colleagues not adhering to social distancing, making sure that your work provides you with PPE, that's a resource to tap into. And as we mentioned, I think Peter mentioned again, transportation, right? So right now, my experience as a provider is that there hasn't been the typical ways for folks to get transported to and from work. I put this resource in there. This is just for Sacramento area. Although I did some advocating yesterday for the Southern California as well area. UCP has a transportation service that's offering door-to-door transportation, and that's up just in Northern California, but we're again hoping to get that down into Southern California as well. But again, transportation is also something that you have to consider when considering employment. How are you going to get to and from work, right? So, and if the typical modes in which you would typically get to and from work aren't available right now due to COVID, then who do you ask? A family member, a friend? We do have a number of folks that have become suddenly interested in going to the DMV and trying to figure out how to get their own driver's license, which is great. So it's kind of moving, I think, people more into the, kind of that self-reliant way of life. So, and then again, anything by Griffin Hammis, we do a lot, all of us on the board do a lot of work and utilize their curriculum. So definitely tapping into the service delivery, the guidance is always good. We highly recommend that.
Great. And before we move on to the next slide, Debra, I have a quick question for you because the first bullet point on this slide is a resource that you pointed us to. Could you tell us a little bit about this resource from the Institute for Community Inclusion?
Sure, yeah. So this is a really nice 2-page, really short read, but it just takes you through a bunch of questions around how you feel about your health and safety during this time of COVID. I mean, what we're really finding is there's a huge range. There's people who really don't want to leave the house, and you know, they might be able to work on some like employment preparation or some of the things in the Griffin-Hammis material, which is very laid out and explicit, and there's tons of stuff you can do from home. But you know, this is a really nice guide to help pose the questions that you should answer to kind of figure out, like, where am I right now? Like, check in with yourself and decide if, you know, how you want to move forward. So.
Perfect, thank you. Now we are moving on to self-employment as an option.
So with self-employment and microenterprise, I've seen as a provider, a number of folks that are just kind of going, I need to figure out something to do for myself and how can I contribute to society. And so it's really taking a look at what your talents and interests are. I've got a gentleman that I'm supporting who's blind, and he is very interested and has his baker's certificate, and just got really discouraged because he wasn't able to land any interviews or anybody that was willing to take a chance with him. And so he came to me probably about 3 weeks ago and said, you know, I'm tired of getting all the rejections. And so he said, I think I'd like to start my own business. And I said, okay, let's do it. I'm, you know, here and willing to get on that journey with you. So he has that interest of baking, and we're starting to explore what that means for him. Right. And so where does he need support? Who does he know? Right. Kind of like, we're in that phase of, let's gather our information and let's get together. Let's start throwing some brainstorming parties and kind of figure out who people know. You know, who, and then also, I think as Brittany mentioned with the informational interviews, is that I really encouraged him to start interviewing, you know, being able to interview folks so through Zoom type media. And actually one of his coaches said, hey, I know somebody that runs their own catering business. And it's like, there it is, right? So, I mean, that's just as an example as to, wow. So let's get you to do an informational interview with that person, see if it's something that you even want to do, because you have the idea, but it may be that you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is just way too much work. So again, testing the idea, make a plan, right? Look for resources. So, and again, Griffin-Hammis has their resources there. It's an entire book there. I think it's great. It's good probably to purchase it if you're really interested in doing self-employment micro-enterprise, because it is a business that you are going to be running. And so that resource will walk you through, you know, A to Z. And again, just to kind of piggyback, some of what related businesses, or delivery services, cleaning assistants. I know right now we've been able to support folks to get jobs during this time on like COVID cleaning jobs that are really, folks are really interested in making sure like the doorknobs of businesses are, you know, checked or cleaned, and, you know, different areas, you know, because of the CDC guidelines, especially when it comes to businesses, there's specific areas that businesses have to document and outline as to if they are going to be open to the public, that they have to make sure that they have a plan for. And so we've been able to come in and provide that need for the individual business, and then the person gets employed. So takeout and curbside, obviously PPE, lots of folks making masks, tons of new Etsy sites showing up these days, table and chair rentals, printing services, signage, takeout menus, maybe not so much right now, but once we reopen, working from home and recreation needs, web services and technology assistance. That's, if you have that niche right now, that's definitely needed with all of us jumping on Zoom and WebEx and all of those other good media sources. So these are our resources. Definitely with an option for micro enterprises, that PASS plan, you know, plan to achieve self-support. There's the full PDF that's there, contacting your Department of Rehabilitation and Regional Center for support to get funding for coaching for somebody to be able to help and support you during the time. Also, obviously, SBA, the Small Business Administration, because it is, again, to emphasize that this is a business that you will be running. So you got to think about that too, if that's something that you want to take on, because it's a big responsibility. It's not that it can't be done, but it's definitely a responsibility. SCORE is great. I've used that with some of our folks. It's retired executives who just offer their time and mentorship that have run businesses in the past. So they'll be able to give you even tips about how to look for funding for your business. Obviously, there's the Micro Enterprise Center networks. And again, how are you going to raise capital or startup money for your business? And it could be that you look to family and friends to get a loan. There are other places that if you're looking for small loans that you could look into, but definitely going back to SCORE, there's a number of ideas there with actual folks that have worked in or had their own business. So that's all I have. I think I'm going to throw it either to Debra or to Catherine.
Yeah, so we included this slide for just some additional resources. The National Emcee organization is actually holding their first virtual conference. It's been going on for many years, but they had to shift to a more virtual world. And through some of the presentations, they've shared some of these great opportunities and resources for individuals to access. A couple of them include career path exploration. That's the first couple of ones. And it really allows individuals to get a glimpse into different and unique jobs that are out there without actually having to go into the physical location. It's a 3 to 5 minute video of what that industry looks like, and they start to interview individuals from that industry for how they got there, the credentials it took to get there, and what that journey looks like. So now is a great time, I think, to utilize some of these resources. If you're not comfortable going back to work right now, this is a great time to just start exploring and seeing what's out there. I know on the 50 videos for career path exploration, they had all types of jobs, including botanist, beatboxer, break dancer, water researcher. So they've got a vast number of different types of jobs, and now's really the perfect time to start exploring and seeing what else is out there and what starts to pique your interest, so that when things do open back up, those are the areas that you can start to explore in person. So we wanted to share these. These will be available linked in the PowerPoint that we'll be sharing.
Great, Catherine, thank you so much. So one of the things that we wanted to leave you with at the end of this presentation was a sense of what you can do if you are interested in focusing on employment. Maybe you've thought about employment before. If you're not working currently, but you would love to, and you're not really sure how you might be able to do it during COVID, hopefully this has given you some ideas about some ways to start diving into that. So on a very practical level, if you do want to start focusing on employment and you haven't already, one of the things that you might want to do is to talk to people on your circle, talk to your service coordinator at your regional center, ask for a provider who uses some of these best practices and approaches that we've been describing today. Ask for someone who uses a customized employment approach. As you can see, these are all very person-centered principles, many of which may be very familiar to you. If for those of you who have gone through a person-centered planning process, it's a very similar process, just applied to your employment interests, goals, and strengths. But customized employment is a term that really describes what that process is. So you may want to talk to your service coordinator or other people on your team about that. To find someone, a provider or a staff member at an agency who is well trained in customized employment practices, you might be wondering, how do I find someone who I know has experience with these approaches and has done it and has received a certain level of training and education? You can ask for someone who is either ACRE certified, and ACRE training is, I would say it's sort of the gold standard of training for professionals who are practicing customized employment. You can see that ACRE stands for the Association of Community Rehabilitation and Education. The website there will tell you a little bit more about ACRE training. You can also go there to find a list of individuals and other providers who have this particular training. There is also an exam that similarly can give you some confidence. If someone has taken and passed this exam, they have studied and worked very hard and gone through a lot of training to essentially be certified. If you've passed the exam, this is someone who has a certain level of competency and training in a lot of these practices that we've talked about today. And last, I know that we have covered this point, but in talking with, I think especially with younger individuals, since my experience has been with transition-aged young adults, I've found that many of them may not realize that self-employment is something that you can get job coaching for. It is certainly something that you would want to do. Just because it's something that you do on your own, it doesn't mean that you are on your own for figuring it all out. As I hope we have demonstrated today, there are many people, many agencies that are out there ready and available to help you take your idea or your interest and really develop it into something that you can do. You can get support for that. So you can also ask for job coaching if that's an approach that interests you. So we've reached the point where we are thinking about questions, brainstorming, and feedback. First, Judy, before I get to questions from the audience, I wanted to circle back to Kevin because we learned a little bit more about Kevin and his work experience, and it must have been really disappointing for him when COVID hit and he wasn't able to continue the work that he was clearly enjoying so much. I wanted to ask our panelists if they have any comments or suggestions or ideas for Kevin after learning more about him and his situation. Anyone? Feel free to jump in.
So this is Deborah. I have a few ideas. I mean, it's not impossible to find jobs right now. In fact, now is a good time to put yourself out there. And I wanted to make kind of a more general comment about kind of really talking with different employers and businesses. It can be places you go to, you know, get your hair cut. It can be the store you always go to. I mean, talking to businesses and people you know about what are the needs here? What are you guys missing? What do you need? I think those are really good questions to be asking, and not just you, but your circle of support, your family members, you know, anybody who can kind of, you know, gather information about where employers are right now, where businesses are right now, in what they need. And I'll just give you an example. So I had a real estate firm here in San Diego reach out to me yesterday and say, hey, so like we had to lay off half of our staff when this all hit, but now like things are suddenly picking back up and we have this need. We need to hire a temp person, and it's important to us to hire a person with a disability. Well, this is a place where I know some of the people, and I've literally been talking to them about hiring people with disabilities for probably 5 or 10 years. And, you know, I just keep kind of I just keep talking about it, and I keep underscoring, I mean, there's resources you can find to like comfortably talk to businesses. This is not about charity. This is not about a social project. This is because you have a business need that the person I'm suggesting could fill. And so I was really excited when I got that inquiry, because I could, you know, I put out some information to some people locally. Within 24 hours, those folks have already sent their resumes. And so, yeah, maybe this is just a temp job for, you know, a month or two, but you've got your foot in the door and you've got something going on. And, you know, there's all that negotiation around, you know, most places are trying to do as much remotely as they possibly can. So this is kind of a perfect time to, you know, make sure you've got your technology needs set up, make sure, you know, that you have some, you know, adaptability, that you can do things remotely if you have to. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that just talk with businesses. This is about their needs. This is about, like, even in that situation, that's not a customized employment approach. And customized employment is not necessary or needed by everybody. It's for some people who maybe have not had success in kind of the typical, like, put your resume in type of hiring process. So like, not only did it give me the opportunity to like feed them some applicants who are people with disabilities, but then I also got the opportunity to talk to them about, hey, how do you guys handle reasonable accommodations? And if a person applying can't do maybe you know, a Zoom interview is going to be really, is not going to work for them, you know, what are some other possibilities? How could they, you know, make sure your hiring processes are following the ADA, and that you know, talk with your HR people, make sure they know what they're doing. So anyway, I want to throw that out there for what it's worth. So.
Thank you, Deborah. And Rebecca, Brittany, or Catherine, do any of you have anything to add? Any other advice for Kevin?
I would just say that, yeah, even if it is something that's just temporary, you know, nothing's permanent. And if you come across a good opportunity for this time being, it's so important to get any experience possible, and also just to the networking piece. You know, the more relationships that you can build throughout the process, the better, because it can always lead to something else in the future. So just want to say that as well.
Excellent. Peter, do you have some suggestions or advice?
Everyone's given really good suggestions. That Kevin, I have to say that, you know, years ago I was laid off. It wasn't because of anything like COVID-19, but there was a funding reduction where I worked, and I got laid off. And so I had to do many of the same things. I had to, you know, reach out and talk to people and utilize my connections and people in my life circle of support to, you know, so I can find another position. And it takes time sometimes. So I know as people with disabilities, or I'll speak for myself, sometimes it does take a little bit of time. We think there's something wrong with us. And it's not that. It's just sometimes it takes people time to find another position. But it's also a great time to be able to, or an opportunity to be able to decide, what do you really want to do? And maybe find that other job. And I do agree that taking a job, at least temporarily, is a good step. I did that for a while, and I learned some skills I didn't have before. I worked with in social services with seniors for a while, and I learned a lot that I didn't know before. So with every change, there's always opportunities. So I think what's important is that you remember, you know, stay focused on what you want to do, but also we all get down and we all get discouraged. But remember, it's not about you. a lot of people are experiencing job loss, and that you have plenty of skills, and that it may take a little bit, but you will find your niche. So it's important as people with disabilities that we build each other up.
Peter, those are such wise words. They are so applicable to so many of us, in addition to Kevin. I appreciate your comments so much. Thank you. Before we get to some of the other questions that have come up on the Q&A, Catherine, I was hoping you'd be able to help us out with this. We did have one additional slide. I've stopped sharing them for now that we've been started more of a group discussion, but I did want to give you a chance to talk about the next event we have coming up in August for CalAPSE.
Yes, thank you so much, Vivian. So CalAPSE will be putting on a webinar on August 12th from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. And the idea behind the webinar is to provide information, resources, and kind of guide people through the actual transformation of programs, since we are in such a unique time and programs have vastly changed within the last 5 months, going from in-person to remote, something that we've never done before. We wanted to capitalize on this time of change and really take a look at our providers' day program and in all these different services to say, if we're changing right now and we can change that quickly to remote, let's use this time to, if we're looking ahead and looking at how we're going to re-entry back into the community and back into sites, let's take that time and really transform our programs to make sure that they're person-centered, they're individualized, and we're really accessing the community. So that's what this webinar will be about, is to help programs guiding you through that process and the different tools and resources and what that actual transformation looks like. So it'll be about 2 hours with some discussion and question and answering that we're going to share what that transition has looked like. We have members of our board who have actually taken their programs through that process. So we know it's doable, but we wanted to share with our provider community across California how to do that and how to use this time to truly reinvent, reimagine, and redesign your services, since we're already having to do that. So we wanted to put that out there. We would love for you guys to join. It will be $20 for non-APSE members and $10 for APSE members. We will make sure, I'll try and put the link up in the chat box ahead of time. If not, I will send the registration link to Vivian and she can send it out to the entire DVU group. But we encourage you guys to join, share with your networks. We're really excited to use this time to help programs transition into really what aligns with Employment First and HCBS and what the individuals truly need. So we're really excited to have as many people be part of that conversation as possible.
Fantastic, Catherine. Thank you so much. We are really looking forward to that event. Lastly, I wanted to give a huge thank you just to the entire CalAPSE board for collaborating on this presentation. I wanted to give a shout out to other board members. Those of us you see on the Zoom screen, this is not the entirety of our board. We could not have done this without some of our other members. I can't see you all, but Sunny, Laura, if you are out there and you want to say hi or share your information in the chat, these are also some incredible professionals with so much experience in employment. So please say hello if you guys are there. We also have other board members, Carol Wattillo of Progressive Employment Concepts, and Pam Arturi of Easter Seals. They are also really essential members of our board and helped us craft a lot of the materials that you saw today. So,
and I also wanted to plug really quickly, if anybody is interested in learning more about what California APSE and National APSE is all about and how to be involved, please feel free to send us an email to caapse@apse.org, and we'll put that out in the chat as well. But please feel free to reach out to us. You can check out the National APSE website to see what it takes to be a member. But we would love to have you join. Anyone is welcome. So please go ahead and check that out or email us with any questions about becoming a member.
Perfect. And yay, I see that that email address has made its way to the chat. It is also included on a last slide that we didn't get a chance to put up, but it will be in one of the last slides of this presentation, which will also be available on the DVU website. So Judy, have you had a chance to take a look at any questions that might have come in?
Yes, so many questions for all of you. So some people are saying that they've had, I mean, there's different kinds of things that are coming across during the COVID crisis. For example, people are saying that some regional centers are not even funding employment supports during the COVID crisis because of safety reasons. We know that that is actually not a state policy. I want to give, I want to explain to folks that you can use what's called participant-directed services for work supports right now. Prior to COVID, you had to use an agency, but now you can actually hire a support staff to support you in your job. Anybody who you know and is familiar to you so that you stay safe. So for example, and you can even hire your parents, and your parents, one of your parents can get paid to support you in your job during the COVID crisis. It's called participant directed services. If you call your regional center and your service coordinator says, I have no idea what you're talking about, then ask to speak to their supervisor. If they have no idea what you're talking about, then ask to speak to their supervisor, because regional centers are supposed to know about this. But what we've been finding is that a lot of regional centers staff have not been trained on participant directed services. So the whole reason that it exists is so that you can hire someone that you know and you feel safe with, that will not bring COVID into your home or into your life. Does anybody else want to comment on participant-directed services or any of that area before I move on to some of the other questions?
I just want to jump in. I appreciate you sharing that, Judy. Thank you. I think that's something that's really important to know that's there as an option. And I always recommend bringing that conversation home to service coordinators to say, you know, this is the importance of my going back to work. I am an essential worker. It's my right to work and my right to be supported in that process. And so I would say having that conversation again with the support team and saying, you know, this is my right. How can my team support me in making that decision? And if that doesn't happen, then the participant directed services is a great option to maintain that support during this time.
Thanks, Catherine. Some people are also saying that they have been getting inadequate support from the Department of Rehabilitation and their school district. So, you know, maybe somebody can talk, maybe, I don't know if that's Brittany, because I know you talk a lot about transition, but what should people be asking for from their school district versus asking, these are for obviously young adults transitioning to adulthood. What should people be asking for from the Department of Rehabilitation, and what should people be asking for from their regional center in order, especially during this time of COVID, in order to get a job?
So I don't know if I can answer this the best of everyone on this panel, but while your son or daughter is under 18, so, you know, under 18, I would suggest connecting with student support services from DOR. That's kind of before that transition happens. And I would just say, you know, to advocate for the support that you need, whatever it might be. If you, I mean, oftentimes, you know, an independent facilitator can come into play there if you have questions of kind of, you know, what your rights are and what you should be asking for, what you should be advocating for. And so I would say maybe look into that. But I don't know if maybe someone else on the panel can chime in, but that's what I would say.
Oh, go ahead, Peter.
I think, you know, one of the things that you can do at both DOR and at the regional center is exercise your rights and remedies. So like, for example, with the Department of Rehabilitation, they have the Client Assistance Program, and there's an 800 number that people can call to connect with the Client Assistance Program, and they help you navigate when there's a dispute or you're not getting a service that you feel that you're entitled to. And in the regional center, of course, there's, going through the rights and remedies process there, or through clients' rights advocacy. And, there's different levels, and sometimes it just takes a meeting with a supervisor to say, hey, I have the right to these services, and I need them, and you guys need to provide them, and really push. And it's sometimes a challenge, but you can exercise your rights and remedies. And also, it's important that if your service needs change because of COVID, you bring it to their attention as well.
Definitely. And lastly, I just wanted to add, in terms of trying to figure out, which agency is responsible for what, something that we haven't actually mentioned yet is sort of a structure that has been put in place, or structures that have been put in place across the state that actually bring those three agencies together to really collaborate across agencies to really support adults as well as youth in schools. Those are called local partnership agreements. And that is something that should exist in every part of your state. And Catherine, could I ask you to expand a little bit more about that?
Of course, I was going to mention that. This is something that I'm really excited about. The California Blueprint came out about 3 years ago, and one of the pieces of that was the local partnership agreements. And the Blueprint, along with the local partnership agreements, is a document that Department of Rehabilitation, the regional centers, and the Department of Education came together to say, we need to do something differently in order to support individuals transitioning from high school to the adult world when it comes to employment, getting them better opportunities and placements. They recognized that these three entities were essentially operating in silos. And so the local partnership agreement was meant to bring those three partners, core partners, to the table to say, how can we work better together? How can we create a more efficient system so that individuals across the board are receiving equal and great services and have access to those services? And so 3 years ago, these groups started to meet, and as they've grown and the years have gone on, we've started to include more community partners, which means service providers, community colleges, employers, individuals, families. And so each area is in their own stage of these local partnership agreements, but most of them have been continuing through this COVID, doing virtual meetings, but they're really meant to bring everybody to the table and say, how can we work better together? How can we solve these barriers that we're all facing? And one of the, I think, great things is understanding that each of the partners didn't understand what each other did. And so we've been trying to solve that barrier of really, what does everybody do? And what's our understanding of everybody, so that when we're talking to families and individuals, we can explain that ourselves. And making sure that families and individuals are armed with that information to be able to make decisions and have discussions and go to different entities and say, I know this is what you do, this is what I need, and this is how you can support me getting that, and how we can work together doing that, instead of bouncing in between. And so that's really what the local partnerships agreements are for. The California Health and Human Services website has a tab called CIE, stands for Competitive and Integrated Employment, and that has all of the information about the different local partnership agreements, where they are, what the actual agreement is, different resources. And so I'll go ahead and put that that website in the chat, but it's a great place to look at. And if you're having frustrations with either your local Department of Rehab and you've kind of gone up the chain and you're not getting a lot of response, or you want to be part of the group to help make those changes and have that conversation, I encourage you to reach out to the local partnership agreement. Your local regional center is a part of it. Your local Department of Rehab is a part of it. It's required by state that each one of us is. So I encourage you to reach out and say, I would love to attend the next meeting. I want to be part of this group. I want to help move this system forward.
Excellent. And I see that some of those links have been posted in the chat for anyone who is interested in digging into those further. Judy?
Was one of them the blueprint? Because that was one of the recent questions. Okay, great. So the blueprint.
Yeah, the blueprint is the overarching guidance. It's a 5-year blueprint plan from the state of California. And within the blueprint, they have all these different goals listed. And one of the goals that is listed is the local partnership agreement.
Wonderful. Thank you.
This is Deborah. The same site actually has the published local partnership agreement. So you can see, like, you might be able to see some names or know who's involved, who to contact. So just because it's not on the list doesn't mean they're not working on it. These are just the ones that are actually ready to be published. So
great. Thank you. Some more questions. Somebody did have a follow-up on the participant-directed services that we were talking about, specifically related to employment, and that her regional center said it was going to expire on July 31st. It is true that the governor and the Department of Developmental Services, or DDS, have been extending these, what's called a directive, to include this on kind of like 1 or 2 months or 3 months at a time, and that the current one expires on July 31st, but it is going to get expanded. Unless you guys know something that I don't know, that COVID is about to get cured between now and July 31st, which would be awesome because I'd love to go on vacation. But since that is highly unlikely, it is my strong feeling that these participant-directed services will continue. But you should remember that participant-directed services, there's a whole bunch of, there's 4 of them that have existed since 2011, and they're not part of the COVID issue. That includes respite and independent, it includes respite and 3 other issues that I'll try to get the directive in the chat. But anyway, it will be there. So don't let the regional center say we're not letting you apply for it because it's expiring July 31st, because that's just not the case. Okay, so we have a question for everybody. Do we anticipate in the new COVID world that these segregated placements will be transitioned out because of risk and safety? For example, sheltered workshops that have hundreds of people in a building. What do y'all think?
Yes.
At least we would hope so, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So for those of you who heard about, saw in the slide, you were talking about the home and community-based services final rule. It's a very technical term that I really hate. I call it the inclusion rule, just for short, because it is about people being included in their community and not being put into segregated programs like a sheltered workshop or a work program or a day program. And those programs are required to end very soon. Unfortunately, that's been pushed back by another year by the Trump administration just in the last couple of weeks. However, California is still had on target to try to move forward with this, although I do believe that California was part of trying to get it extended. So I'm not sure how supportive the state is in moving us as quickly as we can. But here's my view on that there's a whole lot of really, really segregated programs who are claiming that they can reopen now when COVID ends and will be compliant, that I'm not sure I agree with that. So I think it's up to all of us to really be on top of those issues and make sure that people are truly getting choice and control over their lives in these programs and are not being segregated and under the claim that they are actually being included. So I just ran into that this morning at a person-centered plan. So I just wanted to bring that up. Okay.
Judy, sorry, this is
Yes,
Deborah. I just want to address this because I know it was in the chat also. People wanted to kind of know what are the 5 steps to inform decision-making. And I think this is a really important time to understand what that means. So when your only options given are go back to your segregated day program or work activity program and you're given no other options, that's not okay. That's not informed choice. So the link we had to the ICI, the Institute for Community Inclusion publication on informed choice, they actually took this guidance from the US Department of Justice, but the 5 parts are provide information about the benefits of working in an integrated setting. Number 2, facilitate visits or other experiences in integrated settings so that people even know what they are. And 3, allow, peer-to-peer discussions for both the individual and the families. That's really important to connect about, other people's experiences in the community. 4 is to identify and address concerns and objections raised by the individual or decision maker. And then 5 is to revisit that decision to not work in the community very regularly. So it's not enough to just ask somebody once a year, hey, do you want to go work at McDonald's? Oh, you don't? You want to stay here? Okay. That's not informed choice. So it's come to my attention that sometimes that's how the conversation goes. And I just want people to know their rights and know that that is not adequate. If you ask for, I want to work in a real job, you don't have to use the term competitive integrated employment. Like, I want to work, I want to be in the community. They need to provide those supports, and you need to step back and figure out, how to move forward, whether that's through customized employment, supported employment. There's other options. So I just want to add that.
Thank you. Somebody was asking how people get one of these superstar customized employment specialists, even if it's for after COVID. Like, how do you find one of these customized employment specialists? How do you get somebody to pay for it? Can anybody help with that?
Sure. I'll try to take a stab at that question. And if anyone else on the board wants to share, please do. I think the best way is to reach out to your regional center and talk with your service coordinator. This customized employment is something that is new, and so it's not necessarily consistent across the state of California. So I think initially talking with your service coordinator, if they're not aware of it, actually reach out to California Emcee. We have board members across California who are very familiar with who is doing customized employment, and will be able to connect you with that agency and the regional center and the funding process for that specific area. So I would say step 1, talk with your case manager, service coordinator at the regional center. Step 2, email us and we'll connect with you and support you through that process.
Thanks, Catherine. Here's a self-advocate who's asking, hi, I'm Robert, but everybody calls me Bobby. I'm a new member of your organization. Thank you, Bobby. I'm an experienced park maintenance worker, which I have been doing seasonal park maintenance work for 3 years so far. Ever since I earned a certificate of achievement from Folsom Lake College, I have been having trouble obtaining a permanent full-time job in the government field. I am also a member of Alta Regional Center. So I'm wondering if any of the experts here have any advice for Bobby.
I guess what I would say, Bobby, is have you been working with an employment agency, to get that position? And if you haven't, then what you can do is go back to your regional center and have that conversation that you need more support. There's plenty of us out there that would love to help you get connected and to get permanent employment, especially in the government arena. I work with a number of individuals that just got work at Sacramento Courthouse. So definitely, and I'd be willing to put my contact information in the chat, Judy, if you want us to,
Yes, please.
for folks to be able to reach out. But Bobby, go ahead and reach out and I'd be happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. I think a number of people were looking for everyone's contact information, so please put that in the chat if you could. Go ahead, Peter.
This is Peter. The state of California also has the LEAP program, and that is a program that helps people with disabilities who want to get into state employment. And when you get enrolled in the LEAP program, there's some civil service testing and some modifications that you don't necessarily have to do because of your disability. It alleviates some of the need for certain parts or the exam process. Oftentimes through the LEAP program, you'll stay kind of on your introductory service, you'll stay in your probationary period longer, but once you go through the process, you'll be permanent civil service. And to become eligible for the LEAP program, you can reach out to the Department of Rehabilitation, and that can be able to assist you. And now you don't need to be a client, you just need to go in. I would call first and make an appointment, but bring documentation that says you have a disability or whatever they need. And then they give you a letter that says you're eligible for LEAP. And then you go on the, basically the state website, and I can put it in the chat. I'll look it up, and then you can look at different positions that are LEAP eligible, and then you can apply. So that's, and the federal government has a similar program, although I'm getting tired and I'm drawing a blank on the name, so I'll look it up really quick and put it in the chat.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that. We only have a few more questions. I know everybody's getting tired. Does anybody know what kind of documentation is needed to report work-related expenses, such as buying certain kinds of shoes or pants for a work dress code? Does anybody know about how that works?
So if you go ahead and click on the link, well, once you get the slides or the presentation and click on that link that we provided, it has all that information. It's been in the past, it's been simply a letter that I've written for folks and just outlined what the work expense is and how much it was. And Social Security has taken that. So it's something, it could be something as simple as that.
And Rebecca, could you just clarify which link you were referring to in our slides?
Sure, I'll put it in the chat. I'll take a look.
Perfect.
Thank you. Here's an interesting question. How does one get a specialized driver's training or lessons for a regional center client who could drive with specialized instruction, but the regional center says they don't offer it in their center, even if other regional centers do? Does anybody know about drivers? I didn't know that any regional centers offered driver's training, but maybe Catherine, you know?
I'm not familiar with, I know our regional center does not. I'm not familiar with any other regional center that does, so I'd be curious to know which one they're referencing. And I think maybe Department of Rehab might be a good option as long as it aligns with their employment goal. But Peter, it looks like you might have a better answer.
And I don't know if this is true for the whole state, but for at least for the regional centers that I'm familiar with, they refer folks to DOR, Department of Rehabilitation, because they're more suited and are more able to send them to vendors that can do the assessment, because there's a number of steps that you have to go through before you can get supports around driving. So there's an assessment. So I would go to DOR for that service, and maybe talk to the regional center and see if they can refer you over. You'll probably have to, in fact, I'm sure you'll have to become a client of the DOR, and that takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth it, especially if you're a person with a disability and it's your wish to drive, then go through their process. For driving, it's been my experience that this Department of Rehabilitation really does kind of an extensive evaluation, so it won't happen right away. It's a process, but it does work.
Thanks, Peter. The other thing that I can say is if you're in the self-determination program, I've seen that some people in their self-determination spending plans put in specialized driving instruction or modifications to a vehicle as well in their self-determination plans. So I encourage self-determination for everybody, of course. Linda's asking, what is the status of the Transformation to Competitive Employment Act?
This is Debra. I mean, I'm on the National Emcee Public Policy Committee. So the last time we had an update, I mean, all of that legislation, there were several different acts proposed. Everything kind of stalled when COVID hit. So I'm not aware that that's moving yet, although it's absolutely a priority for Emcee and many other organizations. So.
Great, thank you. So I don't know if there's any Spanish speakers on the phone who have any questions. Lorna, if you want to ask anybody, I'll give you a moment to ask them while I'm looking for more questions. Okay, so so Lorna, just pop in if anybody has a question and interrupt, it's fine. So we, one of the things that I wanted to mention, because there's a number of questions related to education and how, especially there's an individual on our webinar who works at a school, who has a job. She's a regional center client, but who has a job working at a school, and now the schools are staying closed. And what does that mean for her job as maybe an aide or doing other kinds of one-to-one work at a school? And so obviously, each school district is different, but I wanted to let everybody know that next week, a week from today, at the exact same time, 2 to 4 p.m., we are doing another webinar, but this time it's specifically on education and the reopening of schools and how that's going to impact people with disabilities, where most schools are likely to be online only again, at least for the next several months. And what does that mean for special education services and other kinds of individuals? So Vivian is coordinating that one too. Vivian's taking over all of these things, which makes me so incredibly happy. For those of you who are really interested in the education, please join us next week, because I think it's a very hot topic now that we're hearing that all the major school districts in the state are going to remain online for the fall.
And Judy, I am noticing a question in one of the questions from the Q&A box that I can address while we wait for Lorna to get back to us. So I see a question from Susie, who says that, who is with the Regional Center of the East Bay, and she's asking if that regional center could provide a customized employment specialist for those under 18. She's mentioning that 16-year-olds can and do want to work, absolutely, even if it's only a part-time after-school job. And of course, like an adult, they would need support with that too. She says that often the regional centers say vocational training for a student being served by the school district is the district's responsibility, but they won't provide a customized employment specialist or provider either. Susie, that is an excellent point. I had run into that also, and it is something that has frustrated me tremendously, because you are absolutely right. There are some incredible specialists who could really, I think, do a great job of supporting high school age students to find work and find a job and really help a student develop some of their interests and identify what would be good options for them. That expertise does tend to be more in the regional center system, and you are right in that school districts tend to not have that expertise, unfortunately. And so that, I think, barrier, as I think all of us are aware of, where regional centers will often say, if you're school age, of school age, the thing that you're asking for should be provided by your school. That is something, I would say a couple of things. It is a major hurdle, but there are some things that are happening to try to chip away at that. One of the things, as Catherine was mentioning, if you go to your local partnership agreement meeting, which your regional center should be able to tell you more about, and you can contact your employment specialist if you don't have Catherine, if you're not at the San Andreas Regional Center, they can tell you more about that. That is someplace where you can maybe go there and ask locally what some of your local partners are doing to address some of that, to get some of that customized employment expertise to younger people, because that is definitely a real need. The other thing that I will say is that I do know of schools, school districts, or charter schools who are actually willing to take that on. One of our board members, Carol, has actually done that. She entered into a contract with a charter school to actually support high school age students with their program and began to collaborate closely with that school and those students and their families to put together a program that really helped to prepare the student for work and actually had got them jobs and supported them in those jobs using customized employment approaches. So though it is difficult, it's also not impossible, and we're hoping that that will start to change more in the future. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just kind of piggyback off of what you're sharing, because I think part of it comes back to when we talk about employment in general, customized or not, that should start when, I would say when kids are born, we start thinking about those things, but really when they're in the system we're talking about 13, 14, 15 is when we're really starting to see employment come to the forefront. And so I think just from a personal standpoint that it's important that teachers are trained through customized employment so they have that understanding, because what Brittany was talking about is that discovery piece and building that foundation and those layers happens. It's a continual process, but it starts when kids are young. And so making sure that there's in the adult world, we're trying to get everybody to get on board with it. That's a process, but making sure that that also is happening in the school districts. And so like Vivian was saying, we're having those conversations at our LPA so that it's not just the adult world that has access to this customized employment. It's also that the school districts and the teachers are equipped with this information and that education to be able to provide that in the school districts in case the adult world can't step in. And so we're trying to make sure that that information and training is kind of across the board. It's a big goal, but that's why we're here to continue to work on that.
Thank you so much. So the clock says a little bit past 4, so I want to wrap up right now and remind everybody that we'll be back next week with another coronavirus issue about opening up, and that will be around education. I have a feeling that will be well attended by many a parent who is looking for some sort of support to make sure their children are receiving appropriate education. And if you're not on our mailing list, you can go to our chat or you could go to tinyurl.com/join-DVU-mail to join our mailing list to make sure that you heard about it. I want to really thank particularly our self-advocates who joined us today. Kevin, thank you. We hope you get back to LEGOLAND and Disneyland and all the amusement parks. Someday we're going to go to Disneyland with you, Kevin, and you can.
It'll be awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna ride Space Mountain with you someday. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And I want to thank Peter Mendoza. You offered an incredible amount of important information. And I want to thank all the folks at CAPC, Debra, Catherine, and Rebecca, and Brittany. And I also want to thank Vivian, our wonderful board member who arranged almost all of this and for hosting it. So this video will be available on our website hopefully by tomorrow, and it's also on our Facebook page, because right after we get done with this, we will end it and you will get to watch the whole thing over again. So thank you everybody for being part of this, and I hope you all stay safe and this is really the time to be extra safe. This is our coronavirus website. So I will say in a minute, what I've learned is that you must wear a mask this way, over your nose, not down here, but over your nose to protect other people. You can get masks for free from various community agencies, including your regional center, including many community-based organizations. Please reach out to the State Council on Developmental Disability, has also been handing them out. They are also handing out shields, which I recommend people to wear on top of their masks to make sure they're protecting their eyes. And if your mask slips down, at least you've got that extra protection of shields. So please wear that. Don't hang out with your friends who are not part of your household. Just don't do it. Don't do it. I traveled to Yosemite last week and I saw lots of people hanging out together who are not in the same household. And this is why we're in the situation we're in. So please, everybody, stay safe, stay within your household, stay with your family, and we will see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.